If you saw my 1.0 preview video, or the starters I recommend, then you'll know I'm going to play Explosive Ballista Falconer. And today I want to talk about that build in some more details. Now, before I do that, a quick disclaimer. There's some theory crafting, I do have some experience of a build, but things are subject to change. These are just my plans, this is not a full finished build guide. However, I will be releasing a full finished build guide after I play the build, tweak some stuff, adjust things, everything that you're used to, following along with one of the builds I played, including the fact that I'm probably going to change it 5 or 6 times before settling on something. So, if you want to keep up with that, I'll be regularly making videos for my project. Do be sure to get subscribed, leave a like while you're down there. For now, let's get into things. So here we are with a brand new LE planner over at Maxwell GG. This is very new. Some features aren't fully functional, like not all the calculations are here yet, but it's still going to be a great way to plan and theory craft your builds, which is exactly what I've done here. And so I have the Dive Bomb Ballista Falconer. First up, I'm going to go over the equipment, idols, and blessings. Then I'm going to talk about passive points, skills, and finally end things off with a few other plans, what I'm going to target farm, etc., etc. So let's get into it. First up the gear. I want to get a falconry helmet. And I want a falconry helmet, ideally with dexterity, resistances I need. Do I think I'm going to go, oh, I need exactly void necrotic? No. I need resistances as a suffix because I want to cap everything. I'm not 100% sure if I'll need everything to cap. Also, I'm just putting in T5 mods. Obviously, if I hit T6 somewhere, that's going to change the entire calculation. Take all the mods as a grain of salt. I just wanted to be a little lazy and put in T5s rather than balance everything perfectly. I'd also like a chance to shred armor on hit, just to really stack it up super fast, but if I can't get that, not a big deal. On the amulet, I think a turquoise is best to get the minion damage, minion crit strike chance. I'm going to aim for crit multi minion damage, mostly because penetration's a little bit rarer, so at the start of a cycle, I'm not as likely to get it. Long term, I could see myself using a legendary, I could see myself using an Orions, that would give me a ton of res. I'd absolutely love to farm Orbis for an Orions. And I'm just using this to fix my resistances. I think I do need the fizz. I'll get into that very shortly. For quiver, even more fizz res, bow attack speed, #1 stat I'm going to go for, and then I just fill it out with anything else useful. But honestly, bow attack speed, bow attack speed, bow attack speed. Like, I almost think I should put T6 to bow attack speed and no other stats on it because that's how that important it is. Then we have a chest piece. Again, filling out my res here. Level of dive bomb's good. Dex is good. Now, if you can get armor and health on it, that's great. If you can get armor and a res, that's great. If you can get health and a res, that's great. I really want to stress that you do not need to try to recreate the exact items I have in here, and in fact, that is just a bad idea. It's not how LE works. For the bow, I'm going to farm Talons of Valor. I think it looks really, really strong, and getting +4 to falconry and dive bomb is totally insane. You also get bow damage and crit chance. And when you crit, yep, you get 25 melee damage for your falcon. So that should be really, really good. Yeah, it's a minion ring with some mana regen. Spamming the traps and ballistae, you definitely do want a little bit of mana regen. I don't think you need a ton of it on all your gear, and I'm going to be experimenting that for comfort. Maybe I'll end up getting a lot more, or maybe I'll drop all of it entirely. I haven't quite decided. We'll just see. Oh, Dex. Get Dex on it. So don't worry too much about the suffixes. Whatever fits, fits. So if you ever ring, I have minion damage here. Again, I wanted to show that you might use other stats as opposed to just mana regen. I kind of think this is going to be mana regen as well. Then the belt, I picked a random mediocre belt with hybrid health. Yeah, hybrid health is really, really good. Also, you might just want to seal mana regen here instead of sealing the ward gain on potion use and cleanse. It's not fully showing up here, but yes, that is a sealed affix. Gloves, ballistae will be freezing, so a little freeze rate multiplier didn't seem like a bad idea. Hybrid health, really important. Endurance seemed like a good idea. So I'm going to aim for really good defensive stats and not worry about damage as much on my gloves, at least to start with. If you're wondering why I had so much cold and fizz res, it's because of Morning Frost. Basically, you get -1% per dex, but you get +1 cold damage to attacks and spells, which you then transfer all over to your falcon, and you're going to do, I don't know, all the damage. Probably all the damage. Is this actually going to be worth it? I don't know yet, but I want to try it. And then last up, get some crit multi, get some dex, fill out stats, the usual. I've said that a lot because there's only so much you can say. Oh, and here, really important thing, you don't specialize decoy, you do specialize all the others. We'll get into that in the skill section. For idols, I really just wanted to show a wide variety of what you can get rather than showing best in slot. You can get crit chance, you can get health. Ideally, you want adorned idols here. That way you have the piercing, the crit multi, minion crit multi. But if you can't get that, aim for defensive stats, fix your health, fix your resistances. Then for blessings, I put in a few examples of recommendations. Now, is this going to really matter? It's 100% increased cold damage. It's probably not going to actually matter because I don't think you can transfer it to your minions really well. But I wanted to experiment with it and maybe get some freezes off the explosive trap. I mean, you're going to get a ton of damage on Morning Frost. And also, Grand Survival. Yeah, really, really, really good. Absolutely get this, cap your crit avoid. The rest, try to aim for these roughly. Obviously, if you already get your bow drop, you don't need more bow drops. If you already get your boots, you don't need more boot drops. These are the items I'm going to target farm. There's also a few other bows that are good in the early game. Oopsie. Scroll down a little too much there. And that's my plan. Next up, coming over to the passives. In Rogue, I got Dexterity and Health. Then I went into Evasion. It's been nerfed. It's still really, really strong. 1 point in Agility. Grabbed some Glancing Blow. Always got to get that. And 1 point in Sapping Strikes to get a little bit of health and mana back. Actually, let's go with the off classes first. So, in Marksman, I wanted Woundmaker for crit vulnerability. Early on, it's going to be pretty difficult to cap out your crit. I do think eventually you'll not only crit cap, but crit overcap, and probably be able to drop this entirely. But to start off, it seemed like a good idea. I also grabbed Focus Fire to debuff enemy dodge rating. That way, if I don't read my monolith and enemies have a chance to dodge, it's not as big of a deal. And Draining Arrows for that sweet, sweet bow attack speed. And gain 35 health on hit for amazing sustain. In Blade Dancer, yep, it's just Cloak of Shadows. You gotta use Cloak of Shadows. I don't know, you've probably not played a rogue in WoW, but I did. Always Cloak of Shadows. Then over here, we've got Raptor's Wings, Handler. I kind of really wanted the base crit here. It scales both types of damage that I'm dealing, and increased minion damage isn't bad. Then I'm going into some maximum health gained as endurance threshold, just to make my endurance more effective. Crimson Shroud. I'm going to try this here, just mostly for a little bit of extra defense, because I'm pretty sure that's one of the better ways to deal with dots. Build might have enough sustain that I completely drop it. Ranger's Mark to give a chance for a buff. Obviously, you want damage for your Falcon. You want to come up here and get extra armor. This way the build will actually have armor. Should feel quite tanky. Tailwind, super good defensive buff. Finesse them, I mean, health on crits pretty darn good, and it's you or your minion. Crit avoidance here is actually something that I wasn't thinking about long-term. If we go back to the equipment for a second, when you actually get this, you can probably drop the crit avoid off a ring. Before you get the empowered version, though, here, I'll just do that. It's only 45%. So to cap, you need the ring and the blessing, and hopefully you get the empowered as fast as possible. Just keep that in mind. Like I said, plans, not finished build. What else do I have here? Oh yeah, Intuitive Connection. Falcon abilities are instant cast. That's going to feel really, really good. I honestly would not play the build without it. And I think that's about it. I do plan to do a lot of adjustment in the skill tree, a lot of micro adjustments. Let's take a look at skills. This is the one part that honestly I'm pretty darn set on. So first up, Explosive Trap. The main goal here, summon Ballista with Siege Engineering, make sure that they are bow skills with Impact Trigger, and use Free Lofting Bird to just spam Falcon skills and buff the Falcon. This is also why I'm not as worried about penetration. What I'm not sure on, though, is there's two ways to build Bow Explosive Trap. I've gone with the Trappist route, where when I directly use the Explosive Trap, I'll get 3 with the Static Mines and the Cold Snap Mines. So the other way to do it is automated bombardment, where as your traps drop, they then redrop afterwards. I've mostly talked about trap-outs in the past. That's what I've used. I will try this and see how it feels. Whichever feels better, that's what I'm going to go with. Then you have shift, which I've spec'd defensively. I'm generating a shadow for Shadow Falcon things. Of course, shadow slip, elusive, and I'm coming up here for rebound. Mostly because I know I'm going to make mistakes enough, and in the early game, you are likely to be taken to half health rather than one shot. In high corruption, you won't ever see this because you are either full health or dead, which makes things really simple. Then we've got falconry. The point of falconry is to buff dive bomb as much as possible. So, falconer's mark marks an enemy. Marking strike lets the falconer's melee attacks also mark the enemy. Avian arsenal. When you consume the falcon's mark, do not consume your falcon. Do not do that. You need it. Don't eat your falcon. Your character damage, specifically melee, throwing, bow, or spell, depending on the type of ability. It's going to be bow in this case. It goes to the falcon damage. It's a lot. You can get 10 stacks of that buff. And you get 10 stacks a lot. Then there's Falconer's Journey. This basically says deal 200% more damage, assuming you can get to 100 dex, which is not unreasonable at all. As you can see here, there's some things missing from passives. The dex is actually much closer to 100. Some extra damage here. These nodes are great because they just apply all of your damage to your Falcon. So you can scale your own damage alongside scaling the Falcon damage. That's pretty good. And so yeah, kill threshold is not necessarily required, but hey, taking out a boss when it's full DR, I'll take it. Next we have Dive Bomb. And in Dive Bomb, the main goal is to reduce Dive Bomb's cooldown as much as possible, and also get Talon Knives, where stats from weapons apply to the Falcon. I'm pretty sure that the text is a little misleading here, and it's stats from weapons apply 60%. But if you're dual wielding, a portion of the damage applies. It's a little confusing. And what else is really important here? Ah yes, the On Wings of Shadow for the Shadow Falcon. This is why you generate a shadow when you shift. I'm not 100% sure if you want 1 point or 2, just going to play around with it a little bit more. Down here, Devastating Dive for some damage and stun duration. The cooldown does go up, but that's fine. We're reducing it a million different ways. And there's also some fun alternatives if this doesn't end up working out. That's just I'll have to test it more, and I'll get back to you. Stay tuned for a future video. Last up, Ballista, or Ballistae, depending on if there's one or multiple. I'm going with Frigid Barrage so that when they explode, they're cold. This way, I should be able to very effectively freeze a lot of enemies. This makes things way safer. Also got Armed Construction and Tripwire, so when 2 go down, an enemy steps between them, boom. Also, 800% more damage. 400% increased area of effect. Again, with 100 dex, this build's absolutely insane. It's screen-wide AoE. Then the only other node that's really important is Practical Build. And yes, the minus duration there, that's actually a buff. So that's just a quick look at my plans for Last Epoch 1.0. If you want to follow along with this planner, it is going to be public over on Maxwell, and you're going to be able to follow along with it. As a note though, very big disclaimer. This is all what I plan to do, not a finished build. Do not take this and assume that you can just play it with no changes. I mean, maybe you can. Honestly, Dive Bomb's really, really OP, so it's probable that you will play it and have a good time. If you do though, just keep in mind that you want to be careful about Morning Frost and having it uncap your res. You'll probably need about 100% cold and fizz res. And if you can get movement speed on these, or even extra res via legendary potential, that should feel really, really good. Aside of that, it's just going to be down to the usual experimentation, farming better items, and all of that stuff. The gameplay rotation is very simple. Spam Explosive Trap until you have a Falcon ready, then drop Dive Bomb to completely annihilate enemies. Alternatively, you can throw out a few explosive traps, and when a Ballista spawns, you simply let it explode and kill everything behind you. The downside of this is it's going to be a little bit hard to go back and pick up that loot, because you're going to be a couple screens away since you probably shifted. When you're trying to set up Big Burst, shift before dropping your Dive Bomb, as that's a great way to set up for extra damage. Remember, that does spawn a Shadow Falcon from your Shadow. Beyond that, it's largely about mana management. You can yourself very, very easily, and while Dive Bomb doesn't cost any mana itself, on the other hand, Falcon Strike does absolutely use mana, and it's not really very mana efficient. When clearing, it's pretty decent to just drop it on a pack of enemies to blow them up, but on bosses, you want to use it very sparingly, probably only ever for the culling effect, since instantly killing a full DR boss at 16% is actually really good value. But spending around 35 mana on something that does very little damage in comparison to dropping a bird or having a Ballista go boom, not great value. One thing that I didn't play around with enough was using Morning Frost and learning to balance my Cold Res, Fizz Res, and Dexterity. I also didn't really play around with Freeze Rate Multiplier. The ideal endgame goal is to freeze most enemies so they aren't a threat, but it's going to take some experimentation to get there. I also think that because this is a minion build which scales off of your stats, it's going to be about finding a balance between your stats and stats for your minions. This is very much of the kind of finicky fine-tuning that I look forward to doing after the game comes out. Now, if you're looking for how to level the build, I suggest checking out the Falconer leveling guide over at Maxwell GG. Just use that, then respec when you get into the endgame, and this is literally what I'm going to do. On the other hand, if you need more handholding into the endgame, check out Maxwell's Dive Bomb Falconer build. I'll link both down below, and yes, you can even use them to yoink loot filters, which is, again, exactly what I'm going to do. Right now, the planner is just a theorycraft, but after I start playing the build, I am going to import my character, override what's there, and keep going as I tweak it so that you can see the build evolve. And now I'm curious, do you want to see more of these casual theorycraft heavy videos, where I go over some plans, and I may and may not end up following the plan? Most likely not, to be honest. If I've been consistent in anything, it's in my inconsistency, constantly changing from one thing to another. That's exactly how I like it. On the other hand, if you want some more resources to help you get started, I'll link to a few videos that I've made up in the card and down below. I especially recommend checking out my crafting guide, since crafting is a crucial part of Last Epoch that you start doing even in the campaign. With that said, I'd like to take a minute to thank my patrons and channel members for their continued support. For as low as $1 a month, you can make videos just like this when possible. Or alternatively, you can buy Last Epoch over at my Nexus, and that also helps support the channel. But that's about it for me today. Thank you very much to everyone who made it to the end. I hope you enjoyed. Good luck with your starter build. Hopefully it goes well, and remember, you can always respec if it doesn't. Maybe you learned something about the Falconer's mechanics, and I'll see you again sometime soon.